The Galactic Academy of Voss Prime had never enrolled a human before Lyra Vera walked through its crystalline gates. The administration had debated it for 3 full semesters, not because humans lacked intelligence, but because the faculty honestly weren't certain what safety precautions a Deathworld species required. In the end, they'd decided she was probably fine. She was, after all, only 17. How dangerous could she be? Dangerous enough, as it turned out. But nobody in classroom 7 would understand that until the morning Zyrex Thorn decided to make an example of her. Lyra sat in the 3rd row, as she always did, close enough to see the holographic equations clearly, far enough from the instructor's podium that she didn't have to worry about accidentally breaking anything when she shifted in her chair. The standard academy seating was not built for human proportions. She'd snapped 2 desks already, both times by simply leaning forward with enthusiasm. They'd given her a reinforced one after the second incident, though the maintenance droid had stared at her for a long, unblinking moment before retreating. She was copying down Professor Velson's notation on quantum orbital mechanics, pencil scratching against paper, actual paper, imported from Earth, because the Academy's stylus interface couldn't register her grip pressure without cracking, when the shadow fell across her desk. Zyrex Thorn was Cathari, a species that had ruled 4 star systems before most of the galaxy's current civilizations learned to write. He stood nearly 2.5 meters tall, his carapace a deep iridescent violet, his 4 upper limbs ending in broad, flat strike pads that his people had used for ritual combat since before recorded history. He was, by every measurable standard, the largest and most physically imposing student in the academy. He was also, by every social standard, an absolute bully. He had made 3 freshmen cry in the first week. He had accidentally destroyed a Velthian student's semester project. He had been reported to administration 4 times, and each time his family's political connections had quietly smoothed things over. He had never, in 2 years at Voss Prime Academy, encountered a consequence for anything he'd done. He looked down at Lyra's paper, at her careful notation, and then, because he was bored, and because she had not looked up to acknowledge his presence, which offended him, he brought one of his strike pads flat across the desk. The paper scattered. Her pencil snapped in half. The classroom went silent. Not the polite silence of mild surprise, the deep, breath-held silence of a room that has just witnessed something it knows, instinctively, is wrong. 23 alien students froze in place. Even Professor Velson stopped mid-sentence. Zyrex smiled with the portion of his face designed for smiling. "Deathworld creature," he said, the translator rendering his click language into galactic standard with clinical precision. "I have heard your kind are very tough. I wonder, do you bruise the same colors as the others?" The room held its breath. Lyra looked at the 2 halves of her pencil. She looked at her scattered notes. She set both halves down very carefully, very quietly, on the reinforced desk. Then she looked up at Zyrex Thorn. Later, the students who'd been in classroom 7 would struggle to describe the expression on her face. Not anger, exactly. Not fear, obviously not fear. One Velthian student, whose species communicated primarily through pheromonal signals, would tell her dorm mates that what she smelled from the human in that moment was something her language had no word for. The closest translation was patient acknowledgement of a problem that is about to be solved. She stood up. She was not, by Cathari standards, large. By human standards she was average, 168 centimeters, lean, with the kind of quiet physical density that came from growing up on a planet that had, for 4 billion years, been actively trying to kill everything that lived on it. Her bones were thicker than they looked. Her tendons were tighter than they should have been. Her resting heart rate was 44 beats per minute, which her academy physician had initially flagged as a medical emergency until a human physiological reference file was consulted. "You hit my desk," she said. Her voice was very calm. Calm the way a horizon is calm before a pressure system rolls in. "I did." Zyrex agreed, clearly enjoying himself. "And now I will." He raised the strike pad again. He did not finish the sentence. What happened next was technically documented in the Academy's security footage and later reviewed, with some academic fascination, by 3 separate departments. The footage was also quietly shared, at extremely high speed, across 17 alien social media networks under titles that translated roughly to, "Watch this. Watch this right now. Why is no one talking about this?" Lyra caught his strike pad. Not deflected it. Not blocked it. Caught it, both hands, the way a human might catch a ball thrown too fast, with a slapping impact that the classroom microphones recorded clearly. She caught the strike of a Cathari adult male, a blow that had once, during a reported altercation in the second-year dormitory, left a half-centimeter dent in a reinforced wall panel. She held it. Zyrex Thorne, to his credit, did not immediately panic. He was large, he was strong, and he had never been physically resisted in his life. He pulled back. She pulled back harder. There is a concept in human martial tradition, developed across thousands of years on a planet where every competitor for resources was trying to eat you, called leverage. It accounts for the fact that raw strength is only part of the equation, that angle, timing, body mechanics, and the precise application of force at the correct joint can allow a smaller organism to redirect the energy of a much larger one. Lyra had grown up being taught this concept by her grandmother, who had grown up being taught it by her grandmother, in an unbroken chain of practical education stretching back to a time when humans had no technology and only their bodies and their stubbornness to keep them alive. She rotated. She stepped into him. She used every kilogram of her dense, Deathworld-forged body in a single controlled movement that redirected his own pulled momentum downward and to the left, and Zyrex Thorne, 2.5 meters tall, 4 upper limbs, descendant of conquerors, went down. Hard. The floor of classroom 7 cracked. 10 seconds. Start to finish, the security footage confirmed, 10 seconds from the moment his strike pad moved to the moment he hit the ground. He tried to stand up. His lower limbs shook. His carapace, which was not designed to absorb impact from below at that vector, sent a cascade of distress signals through his nervous system that his body, quite reasonably, interpreted as a strong suggestion to remain horizontal. He could not stand. Lyra looked down at him. The room was so quiet that Professor Velson's quiet intake of breath was audible from the front podium. "I bruise red," she said, answering his question from 30 seconds ago. "But I heal fast. We all do, where I'm from." She picked up the 2 halves of her pencil, sat back down, and began rewriting her notes from memory. She didn't look at him again. The Academy's medical wing confirmed 2 cracked lower limb joints and significant carapace bruising. Zyrex Thorne was out of class for 11 days. He filed no report. His family made no calls to administration. When he returned, he sat in the back row, and he did not speak to Lyra Vera, and he did not speak to anyone else in a way that could be described as unkind. The Velthian student told her dorm mates later that during those 11 days, the scent coming from his direction of the Academy could only be described, in the closest translation available, as recalibration. Lyra, for her part, replaced her pencil, reinforced her desk notes with a backup digital copy, and continued attending class. She broke one more desk that semester, enthusiastic leaning, again, and apologized very sincerely to the maintenance droid, who this time did not stare at her, but simply nodded and got to work. Word spread, as word does, through 23 alien social networks, 3 academic gossip channels, and eventually a xenobiology newsletter, under the headline, "Deathworld Student Demonstrates Why Terra is Tier 4 Classification." The Academy quietly updated its intake forms. Under the field labeled Special Accommodations Required, the human entry now included a new line, added by someone in administration who had watched the security footage 4 times. "Do not strike first. Do not strike at all. Treat as faculty."